Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Adrienne Montgomery. I'm with ERP VAR, and today we're going to be talking about Sage 100 and payment and shipment processing inside Sage 100, integrated payments and integrated shipments. And I'm so pleased today to be joined by Maya Green over at Fortis. And recently, Fortis and Maya and VIP Integrated Payments joined forces. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And then Starship, flagship shipping solution for Sage 100. Fortis is a leading provider of integrated payments. And Maya Green will be talking about the integration with Sage 100 and their recent acquisition. And Starship, Matt St. John, he's sales executive over at Starship, leading provider of shipping automation. So just a little bit about the companies. So VIP Integrated Payments and Fortis have now combined forces, and VIP is a leading provider of integrated payment technology solutions for North American merchants. And they're differentiated because they've built these very strong relationships with multiple platforms and multiple payment providers to bring in a leading end-to-end payment solution for US-based Sage 100 customers. And their solution is offered through a diversified network of partners, and they've just been building those partnerships very strong for 25 years, and understand how those relationships are an integral part of driving your cost of credit card processing down. And Starship is a leading provider of shipping solutions for Sage 100. It was founded in 1987. So they have a very mature solution with an integrated multi-carrier shipping software connecting your warehouse to the front office in Sage 100 with all the information flowing back and forth. They partner with dozens of parcel and LTL carriers, FedEx, USPS, UPS, OnTrack, and LTL carriers like DHL, Holland, T-Force Freight, Old Dominion, Pitt, Ohio, those leading carrier providers as well. They also do custom integrations with carriers, and they have integrations with Sage 100, Dynamics, GP, Dynamics 365, BC, Sage, Acumatica, QuickBooks, SAP Business One, Epicor, and SysPro. And with all that experience, it helps them evolve their solution because everybody has unique needs that get adopted right into the system. And they also have integrations with e-commerce providers like Amazon, eBay, Magento, Shopify, and WooCommerce. And a little bit about the workflow. We're going to kick it off with Fortis today, and Maya's going to talk about payment processing in Sage 100 and how you can get the lowest rate with all the different details that go into contracts and what to avoid with those contracts. So we're going to kick it off here with Maya and early termination fees and long-term contracts. Maya, how can merchants avoid those early termination fees that often accompany those long-term credit card processing contracts?
So first and foremost, you have to work with somebody that you know and trust. And really what that comes down to is the proof is in the pudding, right? So in integrated payments and ERP, it's the same as with anything else. When you set up a merchant account, there's always a contract associated with it. Basically, it has, the legal parameters that are set that are there generally to protect both sides. Some of the merchant processing long-term contracts are one-sided. So basically, the easiest way to kind of avoid some of the pitfalls and some of the issues that you run into is to work with somebody that you know and trust. So generally, these terms are 3-year term agreements. Some roll into an additional 1 year, some into an additional 3-year. Those are generally no-nos. With ERP, they're generally larger accounts with a lot more transactions, a lot more nuance, and So a lot more things go into them. And the way that we look at it is we want to do the best that we can for the clients, the best that we can for the partners. And what that means is not handcuffing. So we don't do long-term contracts. We do have some parameters in there that make it very easy for the client to, switch if they need to, but we also have a bunch of different options when it comes right down to, the platforms that are used, and it makes it super simple, and it's all based on the setup of the client. So indemnification, what you want to remember with that is it's kind of like an insurance policy. When you set up a merchant account, generally there's a mutual indemnification, which means you both sides have an insurance policy. If one side breaches that, then the other side's taken care of. And really, again, it's a mutual insurance policy. If you run into a situation where there's not a mutual indemnification in your contract, then you want to steer clear of that contract or renegotiate it with your current merchant service provider. We can help you look for those. There are a lot of terms and conditions that are, written in legal language that don't really make a lot of sense to people. We do have people that can look at those for you and help you avoid those pitfalls. And liquidated damages. Go ahead. Sorry, Adrian.
Can you help us understand liquidated damages and just kind of spell that out for us? Because that can be obscure.
Sure. So basically what liquidated damages is it's a clause in the contract that basically says if a client leaves, then the merchant service provider is due a certain amount of money. And what happens in a lot of cases with these ERP clients is they're large. So the volume and the money becomes a lot bigger. So it's really important to look for this provision in your contract, and that's kind of what we help with. So liquidated damages, in a nutshell, is just basically set up as if the merchant were to breach the contract, the client would have to pay the merchant service provider a certain dollar amount times the remaining months of the contract. So if you sign up for a 3-year term agreement, you do 1 year, you have 24 months left, and if you're making the merchant service provider $1,000 a month, you pay $24,000 to get out of the contract. So pretty simple, pretty easy. You want to avoid any liquidated damages or the like in those contracts, and again, we can help you with that.
And
so
Maya,
as
how do you use the data in Sage 100 and everything that goes along with that to get people the lowest credit card processing rate, and how do they know that it's the lowest rate?
Gotcha. So there are a couple of big differentiators, right? When you're working with a merchant service provider, first and foremost, if you want the very lowest rate, you want to make sure that you're working with a merchant service provider that does true level 2 and level 3 interchange optimization. And what that means is that the gateway that they're using passes certain data points across when the transaction is authorized. And it's probably 6 or 7 data points that are passed, commodity code, customer code, zip code, some things that generally aren't passed in a standard transaction that are passed in a level 2 and level 3 interchange optimized gateway. So there are a couple of additional ways to know that you're getting the lowest rate. Again, work with somebody that you know and trust that has proven themselves to you, or your partner that that you work with for Sage 100. But one, know the average rates and fees of your industry. Just know if you're in manufacturing, kind of where they're sitting. Are you B2B? Are you B2C? Or are you high risk? And that's something that we can help you with. definitely do not provide your statement up front just because you want them to come out of the gate with their best rate fee structure possible. You definitely don't want to do certain rate and fee structures. So when somebody proposes a tiered structure, always steer clear of that. Always require an annual rate review, which is pretty standard for anybody. We tell that to all of our clients. Make sure that they're babysitting the rates for you and nothing has gone up. Always make sure that you're working with a decision maker, a manager, not a commissioned employee. If you're working with a commissioned employee, generally you're working with somebody that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for your bottom line just because they're trying to sell it as fast as they possibly can so they make their quota. So you got to kind of consider that as well. And then really overall, the most important part is just to work with somebody that you know and trust.
Perfect. And then what are your thoughts about the equipment leasing and how equipment leasing is bound to contracts and things of that nature?
So fortunately, in the ERP world, you don't have a lot of equipment leasing. We refer to it as leasing because a lot of times it's like a car. You get into it, it's nice, but over time you're paying a lot more than you should for a piece of equipment that depreciates or goes obsolete very quickly. Whereas you can actually, in the machine or the terminal equipment leasing game, you can pick this stuff up for pennies on the dollar. So you definitely don't need to sign up for something that is really obsolete in 6 months and you've overpaid for the next 2 or 3 years. But again, in ERP, you have the anomaly sometimes that needs the actual physical terminal there. Most of the clients are business to business and mail order, telephone order, where they're taking the cards over the phone or e-commerce. So it doesn't come into play a lot, but always steer clear of somebody trying to lease a terminal to you or tie you into a contract with a terminal in there.
And then there's a lot of credit card processing companies, integrated credit card processing companies that offer integrated solutions with Sage 100. And Sage 100 customers might get calls all the time claiming that they can help save thousands of dollars a month if they sign up with them, and they'll do a rate review and compare, what they're paying to savings. How can the merchant, the Sage 100 merchant, know if they're overstating and overpromising these savings?
So this again comes back to knowing who you're working with and trusting who you're working with. What you find a lot of times is in merchant services, there are a lot of gray areas. So when it comes right down to it, the statement savings are grossly overstated all the time. And what you want to be able to do is back those numbers out. Earlier when we spoke about level 2 and level 3 interchange optimization, or level 2 and level 3 savings that's on this slide, basically what you're doing is, if you're doing B2B, standard merchants that do a lot of it have business cards that will actually go through at a lower rate if that data is passed through the gateway. And what that means is your cost from Visa and MasterCard is much lower, right? So when it comes right down to it, the way that these companies are pitching it out is they're showing you a savings that may or may not be true. Most of the time it's super overstated because they're saying that your level 2 and level 3 payments that you're taking are a lot bigger percentage than they actually are. So say if you take 100 cards, maybe 20 of them will be interchange optimizable, and the rest of the other 80 will be just standard cards that will go through no matter what, even if you pass the right data. So at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're working with somebody that does do true interchange optimization, the level 2 and level 3 data passing, and that they're walking you through how they got to that number. The statement over savings generally comes from somebody trying to get the client excited about all the money that they're going to save, but when it comes out in the wash, the savings isn't actually what they said it was. So we can help with that. We can show you, kind of walk you through what somebody did that gave you a quote. If you'd like us to look at it, we're happy to do it.
And then finally, the support. If you're an e-commerce company or you're processing millions of dollars worth of orders every month, you're probably taking a lot of credit cards, and that credit card processing downtime can be extremely expensive, I can imagine. How can merchants know that the support they get from you is going to be superior to the support they might get with another integrated credit card processing provider? Can you just kind of walk us through how you guys support Sage 100 customers differently than some of the other options out there?
Well, the differentiator for us is that we work directly with the partners and the clients. So we're the first line of defense, and these are our actual cell phone numbers. The actual emails have changed, but the cell phone numbers are there, right? So you can call us directly at any point in time if you have questions, need additional training. We'll get you set up. We're not sending you to, a 1-800 number or, a queue that you're going to have to wait in. We are there. We'll answer the phone. Feel free to text us, email us. That's the differentiator, and that's the guarantee that we give to our partners and our clients.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Maya. I'm going to go ahead and let Matt get started with his portion of the presentation. So, Matt, I'm going to go ahead and hand you over control. And we have a couple of questions for you, Matt, that have come up during Maya's presentation about shipping. And one of them is, does Starship support international shipments?
Oh, great question. And yes, Starship does support international shipments. Really, Starship is multi-carrier, multi-mode. So what I mean by that is from the Starship user face, which is displayed on my screen right now, a shipper can actually process small parcel shipments, LTL type shipments, international shipments, even one-offs where maybe we're not having, say, a sales order or an order being created inside of Sage. Maybe an employee wants to ship something, or we have a lot of clients that actually just ship samples and they simply don't create a sales order. So we're not tied to Sage 100. And so, we have about 8 minutes. So what I can quickly do is just for an example, even just show you how fast it is to process international shipment through Starship. And I'm just going to, right from this user interface here, select my sales order. As you notice, I'm just working inside of the Starship program. So one of the nice things with Starship is that we don't have to be inside of Sage 100. We don't have to have Sage 100 installed on our shipping machines. Usually those are out in the warehouse. Really, as a shipper, I could just work inside the Starship program. And with that being said, it's also a live connection. So in this example, I'm pulling by a sales order number, but just know with it being a live connection is as front office is adding new sales orders or making changes to existing ones, Starship's automatically going to be picking those up. And here, once I select the sales order, all that information is going to be automatically pulled into the Starship program. Really, the name of the game, of course, here is to help streamline the complete shipping process. So we want to basically map all Sage fields, and really that's all we're doing. We're simply data mapping the Starship fields to Sage fields. And those could be standard Sage fields, or maybe we need to use a customer user-defined field to help trigger maybe a shipping option, for example. But again, we just want to simply set this up so as a shipper, all my information automatically comes in. I don't have to touch anything. Here I'm even doing a blind drop shipment. We do fully support those where I'm showing it's coming from someone else. Here's my transportation information, simply mapping this from your ship vias. If anyone's doing third-party collect, as you see, that can be automated as well, where I don't have to stop and change the billing type or put in a customer's account number. And then really packaging is, as a shipper, is where I can get into item box detail, or if this is an LTL type shipment, item box pallet detail. Starship also does dimensional weight. So that is a big thing nowadays, and carriers are going to charge you based on the dimensions of the package, not the actual weight. So if those take over, in this case, like this one's 19 pounds, Starship is always going to rate shop at the correct dimensional weight. And then when we process it, it goes to the carrier at the correct dimensional weight. Now here, this is international. As you see, I'm not going to touch anything. Starship actually has in its own database all my required international information set up. So I don't have to stop and select things like Schedule B or harmonized codes. And then down below is that live rate shopping, where we're going to ping your carriers and return published list rates, your live negotiated contract rates. And then in Starship terms here applied is actually plus or minus any freight rules. So if you're doing things like, hey, free shipping over X amount of dollars, or maybe certain customers receive a discount on shipping, they would be able to see those right here. And then of course, for Starship, we can even offer the selection of services. So some clients do best way shipping, where, okay, Starship automatically select the least expensive carrier, or maybe the least amount of delivery days. Right, so even that can be automated. But again, this is international. I'm just going to simply now click ship and process because I'm ready to ship this order. And of course, my machine froze up. But normally, once we just click ship and process, at that time, that's when Starship is going to generate any of our required shipping documents. So of course, shipping labels, packing lists, in this case being international, any of the required international documents Starship can generate. These can even be customized, so it's already signed and dated. So now as a shipper, I don't have to stop and sign and date documents. Same thing if it's a bill of lading form or pallet labels. Forms can be customized. They could be set up where, as a shipper, everything's just going to generate for me. And then it's basically rinse, repeat. I just move on to the next shipment. And then, of course, back inside, let's see if we're back up here. Back inside of, there we go, Sage 100, we are automatically going to create the invoice. So an SO invoice data entry, that's going to automatically be generated for the front office. And then as you'll see, we're also going to write back the tracking information, freight amounts back onto that invoice. And so here's all my different type of documents. But again, these would just normally automatically print out. Starship takes me back here, and then back inside of Sage 100. Here's that invoice for the sales order we just shipped. Here's the tracking on the header. There's my different tracking information. And then, of course, the write back of the freight amount, plus or minus freight rules. And we can even get into custom write backs where, in this case, I'm always sending back my live negotiated rate that I have with the carrier. So this is basically what I'm going to be charged. So in this case, we could always make sure we're not shorting ourselves on the shipping. So I could even change this to say $85. Okay. So that's basically a quick rundown of how Starship handles an international shipment. But again, it's going to be that same process, same look and feel for my LTL type shipments, or even my one-offs where I'm not pulling from Sage.
And can you talk a little bit about e-commerce and the connections with e-commerce providers, and can you have more than one?
Yeah. So actually, let me, I'll put up this slide here and just show you some of the integrations that we have with e-commerce. But really with the e-commerce integrations, they can work two different ways. So we can connect, and I'll just use Magento for an example, directly to Magento. So from right inside of Starship, I can pull my orders right from Magento. I can ship and process them. And then on write back, what Starship is going to do, it's just going to update the shipping information on the order on Magento. Now, most clients, they don't do that because, of course, that process is we're bypassing our ERP system. And of course, probably most clients, especially if we're using Sage 100, we wanted that information to flow from Magento into Sage. So in that world, what we will do is set up the integration as what we call an extension. So just like kind of like I showed you with that international shipment, we're going to create those sales orders based on the order on Magento. We're going to process them through Starship, but instead of just having Starship write back the shipping data back into Sage like I showed you, it would also update that shipping information on the order on the e-commerce site. So we can mark the order complete, of course, put tracking information, so on and so forth. So it kind of works two different ways. And again, most clients using an ERP like Sage 100, we use it as an extension. Now, if any clients out there already have an integrated third-party solution that integrates their e-commerce to to Sage, our integrations aren't required because really what Starship's doing, out of the box, we're dropping that, for example, tracking information into the correct Sage tables. And then, of course, that third-party system, they'll just look at those Sage tables and reverse translate the data back to the e-commerce site.
And we also have a question too. When an invoice gets shipped, when product gets shipped, many Sage 100 customers or merchants don't bill the client until the product is shipped. So Maya, this might be a question for both you and Matt. Can you automatically charge a credit card once the product is shipped based on, the needs of the Sage 100 user?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Oh, Maya, if you might, I'll just quickly on the Starship end and I hand it over to you. But on the Starship end, of course, what we're going to do is just automatically send back, the freight amounts, and that could be an updated freight amount. Maybe we quoted incorrectly. But Starship's automatically going to create the invoice as well as input that freight amount, and then I'll hand it over to Maya, and they'll take it from there.
Yep. So on our side, basically the original transaction will go in for whatever the total is, and then if the shipping comes back different or they add some more items to the transaction later, it can actually be adjusted.
Thank you, Maya. It was very informative. And Matt, I know that you kind of had an abbreviated presentation to what you're used to.
Oh, no worries.
But there's so much.
Appreciate everyone.
So much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 10 minutes is a little too short.
While this poll is up, can we talk a little bit about your EDI integrations and other integrations in the warehouse that help automate the entire process from a shipping
Yeah,
standpoint?
of course. Yep. So Starship, of course, not only integrates with e-commerce, as I mentioned, the third-party e-commerce integrations out there, but also any EDI or WMS warehouse management system. And with WMS, it's plug and play. Nice thing with that is, however I define the shipment on a handheld device, that's how it's going to flow into Starship. So at time of shipment, our shipments are already built for us. And then, of course, with EDI, Starship can generate GS1 128 or UCC 128 labels. But really, the same thing. Once I click Ship and Process, what Starship's going to do is pass that required EDI information back into the EDI solution, and then they'll automatically take that data from there and upload it to trading partners. So those are a couple of the other integrations that we have. And then also, I kind of mentioned about quoting. I showed that from at time of shipment inside Starship, but also so everyone knows, included with Starship is the ability to actually rate shop right from sales order entry. It does not require any additional user seats, so we'll basically just add a rate quote button in sales order entry in Sage. Whoever needs to, they could click that, and it will open up a screen that looks just like Starship. So as a customer service rep, sales rep, I have all that ability to do kind of everything I quickly showed you right from inside of Sage, get a live rate quote, of course, close it, and then Starship would just update the sales order with the correct rate, for example.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Once again, we really appreciate you spending your time with us. I know that we are 3 minutes over the allotted 30 minutes, so we really appreciate you sticking with us. And please stay tuned. We'll be having more of these types of webinars in the future. And let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.